The Abduction of Herbert Schirmer. In the early hours of December 3rd, 1967, 22-year-old Patrolman Herbert Schirmer was doing his usual rounds on the roads and highways in Ashland, Nebraska. He had just left the gas station after checking his security and went onto Highway 63. He then noticed some flashing red lights and thought it was a truck up ahead that had stopped. As he approached, Herbert put the high beams of his patrol car on the truck, and then these lights started to rise up in the air. He was around 50 yards away from these flashing lights, and as he got closer, it seemed like they were coming out of some sort of porthole which circled an unknown type of aircraft. This craft had what appeared to be a kind of catwalk going down the centre of it, was shaped like an American football, was very metallic like a very highly polished chrome bumper of a car, and had a reddish orangey glow coming from beneath it. Herbert and his patrol car were then engulfed in a blinding white light, and a weightless, pulling feeling overcome him. He and his car were being pulled up a bank towards the unknown craft and out into a field. His feeling of shock turned into a feeling of tingling nothingness. Then the craft landed in the field in front of the patrolman. He felt paralysed. A hatch opened up from the craft and two humanoid figures carrying unknown devices started walking directly towards the front of the patrol car. The driver's side window was almost fully open, and one of the beings pressed an object resembling a pen against Herbert's neck. Herbert then involuntarily got out the car, and the beings, who seemed to be some form of reptilian humanoid hybrid with cat-like eyes wearing a suit with a winged reptilian insignia patch, escorted him to their craft. They communicated with him in a way that he understood and referred to him as the watchman of the town. He was given a tour of the craft, and the beings reassured Herbert that they were friendly and meant him no harm. They spoke to him and said one of their main reasons for landing was to extract electricity from power stations, and that they have been observing us for a long time. Herbert was returned to his patrol car unharmed, and when he got back to the police station, he noticed it was only 3 AM. He'd lost 25 minutes, but it felt like a lot longer. The Allagash Waterway Abduction. Brothers Jack and Jim Weiner, along with their friends Chuck, Rack and Charlie Foltz, had all decided to go on a fishing trip to Allagash, Maine in August of 1976. They were night fishing and had lit a fire on the bank so they knew where their base was. They had been out on the lake for several hours, and all of a sudden something in the distance caught their eyes. It was a bright spherical object around 80 feet in diameter hovering over the trees a couple of hundred yards away. It seemed to be changing colours between red, green and a whitish yellow as it moved back and forth. It slowly started to move across the tops of the trees and along the bank, and Charlie Foltz signalled SOS with his flashlight. The object immediately moved towards the canoe. Frantically, the men tried their best to paddle to the bank, but a hollow bluish white light engulfed the boat with the men still in it. The next thing they knew, they were all back on the bank and the fire had extinguished, suggesting that they had been gone for quite some time. They didn't really think anything of it and carried on with their lives. It was later on that the night's events would have revealed itself to the men. In 1988, Jack and Jim began to have severe nightmares about the four men sitting on a bench, naked and full of fear. Jim decided to contact UFO researcher Raymond Fowler. Ray wanted to help, and the four men underwent hypnosis. What they revealed was harrowing. On that night of August 1976, they were taken into this alien craft and tied down on metal beds in a room that resembled a vet clinic. The beings had large metallic glowing eyes with no eyelids, and their hands were insect-like with 4 fingers. The 4 men were subjected to humiliating physical examinations, including the taking of skin and fluid samples. The descriptions of the aliens were consistent, and, being artists, they were able to make detailed sketches of the entities, the craft, and the examining instruments. After psychiatric examinations, all 4 of the men were deemed to be mentally stable, and they all passed lie detector tests. The Walton Experience. It's November the 5th, 1975, and Travis Walton was finishing up after a hard day's work. He was a logger working with 6 others in Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. After a few minutes of driving alongside the ridge, Travis noticed a bright white light on his right hand side coming from the trees. Out of curiosity, Travis asked the driver to pull over at the next break. What they saw took their breath away. It was a metallic and glowing object hovering in front of them less than 100 feet away. Travis got out of the truck and headed towards the UFO. His co-workers were shocked at this and tried to get him to come back. Expecting the object to fly away, he was surprised when it didn't. There was a strange noise coming from the object which ranged from a high-pitched buzzing to a deep rumbling growl. All of a sudden, a bright beam of bluish white light engulfed Travis, knocking him to the ground unconscious. The rest of the crew fled in fear of their lives. After arguing amongst each other, they quickly returned to get Travis, but he and the UFO were nowhere to be seen. Travis regained consciousness and woke up lying on his back in what looked to be like a hospital room. His mouth had a distinctive metallic taste, was dry as a desert, and his body felt physically weakened. He felt a smooth, metal-like device strapped from just under his armpits to a few inches just above his belt. As his eyesight regained normality, what Travis saw horrified him. 3 humanoid beings in masks loomed over him. Adrenaline filled his body and he found the strength to get off the table. Lashing his arms around, he pushed one of the beings into the other, noticing how light they felt. They backed off and left the room. After a few minutes, Travis looked for an escape route. He left the room, ran into another, and then a larger humanoid wearing a blue suit weighing around 200 pounds stood in the doorway of the room he just entered. He grabbed him by the arm and gestured to him to go with him. Travis reluctantly did, and he was led to a room where 3 other larger beings were. They grabbed him and started pushing him onto a table. Travis resisted, but he didn't have the strength to fight. One of the figures placed a mask-type device over Travis's mouth and he fell into a deep unconsciousness. He later woke on a cold pavement 33 miles away from home. Travis was missing for a total of 5 days. The Pascagoula Abductions. On the evening of October the 11th, 1973, shipyard co-workers 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker were fishing from an old pier on the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. The 2 men started to hear a strange buzzing noise, and then an unusual aircraft illuminated by a blue light materialized very close to them. It was the shape of a rugby ball, 8 feet wide by 8 feet high and hovering about 2 feet off the ground. An opening appeared in the craft and 3 extraterrestrial beings disembarked and grabbed the 2 men. The beings were around 5 feet tall, with a metallic elephant-like skin with no eyes, a slit where the mouth would be, small conical features where the nose and ears should be, and enormous arms with lobster claw-like hands. The men instantly became numb and totally paralysed, and Calvin passed out due to absolute fear. When on board, the motionless body of Charles was levitated a few feet off the floor with no visible means of support, and subjected to a thorough physical examination. A metallic device seemed to scan all over his body with a feature resembling a huge mechanical eye and shaped like a large football. This ordeal lasted for around 20 minutes, and then Charles was returned to the pier to find Calvin still passed out from the first encounter. Calvin came round, and as the men started to gather themselves, the UFO disappeared into space with a low-pitched zipping sound. Both men stood by their story throughout their entire lives. Charles passed away in 2011. The Robert Taylor Incident. On the morning of November the 9th, 1979, Robert Taylor walked with his dog down a woodland track running alongside Deshmont Moor, which sits to the north of Livingston in Scotland. He worked for the Forestry Commission and was just performing a normal routine check. Things quickly changed for Robert. His day went from being a normal Friday to a day he will never forget. As he turned a corner at the end of the path he was walking along, he was stunned at what he saw. He froze in his tracks and gazed at what appeared to be a large, spinning top-shaped, unearthly object sitting in a clearing just 480 meters from where he had parked. It was a domed, dark, metallic object about 6.4 meters in diameter and had a rim around the center which was set with propeller-like blades. It was completely see-through in places. There was a strong, sickening, foul smell coming from the UFO, likened to that of burning brakes. As Robert stood motionless, 2 smaller spherical objects around 3 feet in diameter resembling old World War II sea mines dropped out of the bottom of the object and raced towards him. They stopped at his feet, attached themselves to his trousers, tearing them in the process, and started to drag Robert towards the larger object. He struggled and failed to break free, and then he passed out either because of shock, fear, or even both. When he regained consciousness, he was laying on the floor in the woods and there was no sign of these mysterious objects. Drained of energy, he crawled at least 100 yards and eventually made it to his old Bedford van. In an exhausted and shocked state, he reversed his van into a ditch and couldn't drive it. He walked home to Livingston. His wife called the police and a doctor who treated him for grazes and cuts to his chin and thighs. His thighs actually seemed to have been cut through his trousers. The police recorded it as a matter of criminal assault, making this incident the only recorded incident where an extraterrestrial encounter has been the subject of a criminal investigation in the United Kingdom. These are my picks for 5 of the most documented and believable alien abduction cases of the 20th century. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.